Thought you were gone, but 4 years on, you're back again. Stop haunting me, please. Just leave me be, please.
Hi, my name is Ben and welcome to Field and Foley. My guest today is Anna B. Savage, a London-based singer-songwriter known for her stark and reflective compositions that blend vulnerability and strength. With her striking voice and minimalist approach, she creates deeply emotional soundscapes that linger long after listening. Following her critically acclaimed debut album A Common Turn and her sensual art-pop follow-up album In Flux, Anna has cemented herself as one of the most captivating talents in the British independent music scene. And her new album You and I Are Earth is out now and it's absolutely amazing. So, thank you, Anna, for being on the show today.
Oh my god, that's so nice. Thank you.
I've been looking forward to that day for a while, to be honest, because I've by chance stumbled over one of your songs, and we'll go into that later. But since ever then, I was captivated with your style, with your emotional songwriting, and especially the performance, which is just amazing in my opinion.
Thank you.
Like the first question I'd like to ask you is, can you maybe tell us the moment you knew that music was your calling and your way of doing things?
Yeah, it's funny. So both of my parents are professional classical singers. So there was never a moment. It was just like a deep knowledge. Just like I know that I'm a human. It was like, oh, I know that I have to do music in some way, shape or form. And actually the difficult thing was just working out how to do it, how to make it happen. But yeah, I've been speaking in music my whole life. I think one of the earliest things my parents remember me doing was singing the Queen of the Night aria from the Magic Flute as I was kind of coming out of the toilet when I think I was about 4. I think I was 3 or 4. And weirdly, that's one of my first memories as well. And I just, it's so, I watched Handel's Messiah basically 80 times every December for my entire childhood because my parents were touring it and rehearsing it. And it's always been my life, my whole life. So it's a real privilege to be able to make it my kind of adult life as well as my kid life.
That's wonderful. And you started out like writing some songs, but then, what was it like to release your debut album? Because that was the first full album, and an album is something that's quite different than just making a song, as I know.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it took me a long time to even release a song. I think I was so worried about not being good enough and not being, all of the nightmarish things that I think most people have, the kind of imposter syndrome stuff. It took me, I think I was 23 or 24 when I released my first song, and already that felt like kind of over the hill. Like I had friends at university who were like, oh yeah, if you're in a band and you're over 24, it's like the most uncool thing you can be. And I was like, we're 23 and we both want to be musicians. What are you talking about? So yeah, it took me a long time to do that. And I released an EP that was 4 songs long. And then I basically kind of slightly crumbled under the pressure because people were very nice and actually took an interest in it. And I thought either I'd kind of won the lottery and somehow managed to write 4 songs that people actually liked, or everyone was kind of playing a trick on me. And everyone was just taking the piss out of me and actually thought I was crap. And, like really just classic imposter syndrome, low self-esteem stuff. So yeah, when I actually managed to finally get my album out, it felt, and it still feels like, one of the biggest achievements of my entire life. I think being able to overcome my own personal goblins inside my brain was, one of the hardest things and one of the best things that I've ever done. And after I did that, I know that a lot of people say that, the sophomore album is tricky or trickier because you have the pressure of the first one. But I was like, honestly, just getting the first one out was the hardest thing ever. I'm chill from here on. So yeah, it's been lovely to release a couple of albums. Well, release one other album and then have another one being released at end of January.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. I have it pre-ordered already, of course.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, that's interesting to hear because I also released an album like in my 30s, so it was a bit later. But it was I'm not really a musician, but I could like then understand how much time it takes and how much effort to like really curate a song and try to get it to all have a common theme and to fit together and everything. And I didn't expect you to say like, oh, it's now easier. Like the first one was, but yeah, of course, all the self-doubt, that's something that's that's always, imposter syndrome is always there. But it's interesting to hear that it's now just more fun, I guess.
Oh God, yeah, it's so much more fun. I feel like, you know, I it's like now, if it was to be the same feeling, it would be if someone kind of turned around to me and said, okay, you have to write a book. I'd be like, I'm sorry, what? I don't have a clue how I would start even thinking about doing that. But obviously, like creating one album, you're like, okay, I did it. I'm sure that I can pull one out of the bag again if I just work hard enough. Because at least I know the kind of component parts, and now I feel a little bit more knowledgeable and able to, you know, do all the things. And I think one of the things as well is that when I started out, I felt like I had to do everything on my own, otherwise it didn't count, or otherwise I wasn't a good enough musician or good enough person or blah, blah, blah. And I think that was a large part of it, but also I just didn't have many friends who did music. I didn't really have the kind of community, the infrastructure to help me know how to do any of the things. So now that I have like loads of people around me who do music, and I keep getting these amazing opportunities kind of presented to me because of my past work, I'm like, okay, cool. Like anything else, I can just kind of, I can work it out. I trust myself now to be able to work it out, which is a really wonderful place to be.
Absolutely, yeah. If you can trust yourself, that's a wonderful. You can get into the flow without the goblins.
Yes,
that's wonderful. I'm gonna remember that the goblins is good. Yeah, and then I wanna swing over a bit to the performances, because that's something, especially for me, it's always interesting to see that you can record something, I don't know, very unique and intense. That sometimes happens. You sometimes have those songs that are, I don't know, from the 70s, 80s, doesn't matter, that are so old, but still you can feel like the energy in the room and everything. And the first thing I saw from you live was the Tiny Desk Home concert, the wonderful one in nature.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, I want to hear why you choose that spot specifically. I mean, it's beautiful, but is it something, where was it exactly? Was it something that's dear to your heart, or was it just there for the scenery?
It's all of the above. It's dear to my heart, and it was there for the scenery. It's a ridiculously beautiful, obviously, bit of coastline, about 15-20 minutes away from where I live in Ireland. And we went around a few different places. I knew that I wanted it to be quite local to where I lived, because, well, for many different reasons, but one of the biggest ones was that Irish weather is so changeable. And yes. We literally spent all day trying to not only find a spot, but find a moment, or at least like an hour when it wasn't going to rain. So that tiny desk, it felt like a miracle, because it happened. I think we started recording at 8 p.m. and finished at like 8. I think it was like 8:30, 8:45. And then it started raining, and then it got dark. And it was just, you know, I mean, there are some clips in the tiny desk of me with my hood fully up, kind of like pretending to play the guitar, because we were just going around places, but it was absolutely chucking it down. There was no way I could get my guitar out. But yeah, I feel like it has the drama of the Irish coastline near where I live, but it was also a bit sheltered, which was necessary. Yeah. And it's just it's a beautiful swimming spot, so it was kind of, you know, beautiful enough, but not the most distracting. There wasn't going to be like loads of stuff going on, although there was a man swimming, which was actually turned out to be great. But yeah, that's why we chose that spot.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Like my wife lived in Ireland for a few years, and she always told me like the weather in Ireland is like in Germany, when you see it's raining, it's like, oh, okay, the whole day it's gonna rain, so we can't do anything. In Ireland's like, okay, it's just wait 20 minutes and it could be sunshine or snow or hail,
It's
whatever.
wild. Yeah, and you could have all of those within an hour. Sunshine, snow,
Yeah.
hail, rain. Like, it is just constantly changing and flipping. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I kind of love that. It kind of has this raw nature compressed into a shorter time frame. And I visited Ireland with her a couple of years ago, and it was amazing. Like the nature was amazing, but also like the ever changing weather was something that is really interesting. That I
Whereabouts did she
experienced
live?
Dublin.
Okay,
On the outskirts of Dublin. But yeah, we visited some, of course, a lot of the countrysides and
Amazing.
cliffs, and beautiful, beautiful country. And after that, after the Tiny Desk Home concert, I listened to the performance and like, oh man, she's really good. And then I checked some of your songs out, and I found the Takeaway show in Paris.
Oh yeah.
And this one was amazing because it's just you singing, like, at least for the first song, just on the street. And I wanted to hear how that came to be. Like, how did they contact you, and how did the concept of you just putting out your guitar on the street and starting to perform the song, this really intense song on the street, how did it came to be?
Oh, yeah, I love Le Blogotech, who are the people who do the Takeaway show. I love them so much. I kind of feel like, amongst other things, but they're why I have a career. Like, Hyde from Blogotech is one of the reasons that I have a career, because when I was first starting out, I did a tour with another person who's the reason I have a career, which is a guy called DM Stith, who is one of the best musicians ever, if you don't know his stuff. And when I was doing that, Hyde, who is the head of one of the heads of Blogotech, saw me perform and then asked me to do a different Blogotech session, which was a Takeaway show, I think, rather than a pocket show or something. I can't remember the terminology. But the show was supporting Father John Misty. And then Father John Misty watched me play, and then he asked me to go on tour with him. So yeah, it felt like everything started actually happening kind of from around there. But for the Influx era Takeaway show on Blogotech, yeah, the director had kind of earmarked a couple of places that he wanted to put us. And the Blogotech sessions are my favourite things. I used to watch them when I was a teenager. There's, the really famous one with Beirut where he's walking down the staircase and just like picking up other musicians as he goes down the stairwell, and then finally you've got this like giant band and they're all kind of following him along. And there was one of Wild Beasts in a car park doing the harmonies for Reach a Bit Further, which I used to watch that on repeat all the time. It was my absolute favourite. So yeah, I was kind of like, you guys choose whatever you want me to do and I will do it. You guys are the best. And yeah, I'm lucky enough to call Hyde my friend. So that's, I think, how I wangled my way into doing another one of those after such an extended period away.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And I saw in the description that they wrote, to watch her sing is to witness an art that comes from the deepest place and is delivered as harsh, sincere, and powerful as can be. And that was high praise.
Wow.
But absolutely deserved, because in that performance is where I first heard the song the first track that I heard from you that hit me like heavy. I cried so much and so long during the whole song, but it was kind of cathartic as well. I mean, it reminded me of so many different things of my past, specific events, and it triggered it very specifically, which was interesting to me. And so I would really like to hear how that song came to be. What kind of, I mean, probably a lot of traumatic events, but still.
Yeah, loads of trauma, and then out came a good thing. It's the like pearl coming out of the pressure.
Exactly.
Yeah, that song's a really interesting one because I have a kind of about 50% of my songs I'll just write them in almost one sitting, not quite one sitting, but they'll come out fairly fully formed and I'll feel pretty confident with them and I'll be like, okay, cool. I just need to, tweak the verse or the lyrics or whatever. The Ghost was not one of those. It was one of the other 50%, which is where like a tiny morsel of a song appears and you're like, oh, that's great. And then it feels like you're not getting anywhere with it and you graft for like years. Like I felt like that song took probably the very first idea that I had for it was probably 4 years before the album was released, and it sounds nothing like that anymore. It just went through iteration. Even in the studio, I was like rewriting the lyrics the whole time, trying to work out exactly how to frame it, how to position it to make it make the most sense. And yeah, it's interesting. I've had quite a lot of people say how much it's moved them, and for me that just feels, it's bizarre. Like it feels so specific to me, and it feels so pointed and so particular that to hear that it's affected other people, or that they feel like they've found stuff within it kind of blows my mind, and it's such a lovely thing. So thank you, I really appreciate that. And sorry for making you cry.
No, it was a good cry. I mean, it was bad and good, but in the end it was good. But that's also something that I realized, that it was very specific, and it's interesting to hear you say that the same thing. And I'm guessing that you tapped into some kind of thing that is not specific to a person, but it is specific to the human mind, or the human heart, more or less.
I think that's one of the things. So I studied poetry when I was younger, and I think that was one of the things from studying poetry that I realized it became so present after studying so many poems, that I was like, wow, the universal, mainly, almost exclusively for me, comes from the most hyper-specific things that you can focus on. And that makes no sense. That absolutely, that's bonkers. But with all of the poems that I was reading, there would be, one image or one moment which would just feel like a punch in the chest. And I guess I know that happens as a consumer of stuff. So like, I know that happens to me when I'm listening to music or reading poetry, reading literature, like looking at art, watching a film. But it feels so unbelievable to me that I could be on the other side of it and making an output that would make other people feel like that. That feels like a real, I feel like I must have done something right to be able to experience this and kind of write that.
Absolutely. I think these hyper-specific things tell us more that we humans are more like that we used to think. Because it's always with those things you learn. I mean, at least for me, it was in my youth. I had a lot of problems in school, and I was very shy. And the more I learned, first over the internet, over speaking to other people that had the exact same problem and exact same issues and exact same, fears and doubts, that made me feel way better, way more connected, and told me also like, okay, if other people can live with this, then I can live with this, and it made me stronger. And I think it's the same for those things as well. But just like you said, with this hyper-specific things, these are specific to you, but the feelings they produce and the images that pop up in your head, that can pop up for someone else as well. And I think that's the way to connect, probably. Yeah, I think so. I'm just rambling here, but yeah.
No, I love it. It's so true. And it's, it feels like alchemy. Like it feels, you don't quite understand how it's happening, but it's pretty magic when it happens.
Absolutely. And with both your albums so far being so deeply personal, how do you navigate like the vulnerability of putting so much of yourself into the music? Because you can see it in a performance, especially the one that I already said, the Takeaway show, where you break down in tears yourself from your own song, which is even more special for me, because you see that you're really into your craft, that you really put a lot into that. Is that something that takes a lot out of you, or is it more cathartic and helps you deal with all that?
It's an interesting one. I guess it depends on the day. Sometimes I find it deeply embarrassing. Like, bursting into tears after singing a song in front of a crew of like 9 people. That was kind of mortifying. And I had to kind of be like, oh no, I cry all the time. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Like, don't worry. Don't try and comfort me. It's fine. I'm just leaking. Like, it's not a big problem. And I've cried on stage quite a few times as well. And it always takes me by surprise. I think, I just wear my emotions very, very close to the surface. And sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes it's exhausting. And I can never really say which one it's going to be. There was, I mean, you know, I've even cried about stuff that's not in my songs on stage. Like I did a show. Do you know Stephen Sondheim? Yeah. So I did a show on the day that Sondheim died, and I basically like dedicated the show to him and just burst into tears. And then I was like, oh my God, how am I going to continue? Because also when you're performing, you're trying to like host the space.
Yeah.
So it slightly feels like it becomes quite perilous if I lose control, if I cry, because it means that, you know, I don't know if people are going to be on board with that. I don't know if people will find it too overwhelming, because, you know, crying is hard. It's hard to see people you like cry. It's hard to see people you don't know cry. So yeah, it's a dangerous game that I play.
Playing with fire, I see.
Yeah, exactly. Playing with fire. But yeah, sometimes it feels really nice. And also it feels nice. There's that song in particular, Say My Name, which is from my second album. I couldn't not cry after playing that song for the first, I don't know, 10 times that I played it. So every rehearsal I would cry. In the take on the album, at the very end you hear an intake of breath, and it's because I've started crying. I cried playing it on Bloggertech. But now I am able to play it without crying most of the time, which feels powerful.
Well done. Yes.
Thank you. But I guess it also, I mean, I've done now by this point a lot of therapy, so I'm used to my own tears. My tears happen a lot. And I guess I've realised that my tears alert me to the fact that something is either hitting right, or it's moving, or it's changing. And it actually feels quite nice now if I'm not expecting to hold a space, to know that I can, like, I think Say My Name for me is a song where I feel like I expressed exactly what I was trying to express. And I think part of it is, you know, sadness for me in the past who felt those things and felt like she needed to express that. And part of the tears is also like, wow, I can't believe that I can hit myself again and again and again this hard by what I've written in the past. Like, I feel so proud of that in a way. So yeah, it's a complicated kind of silly thing.
I wouldn't say silly, but yeah, complicated for sure. But yeah, I mean that's the whole thing with being someone who's very emotional and very empathic, that it's just intense. It's just intense. And yeah, maybe another question I have as well about that is that your music has this blend of the emotional intensity, but also the minimalism. Yeah, very much of those songs is just guitar. Sometimes a lot of pauses, which are not really pauses. I mean, there's breaths and stuff like that, but it's very sparse. And how do you like approach the songwriting for those? Is it do you just go by feel, or do you like structure songs to hit a certain feeling?
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like, whenever I'm writing in the past, basically exclusively, I've only ever written on guitar, which obviously has a lot of space just inherent in the fact that it's just voice and guitar. And I think that when I've come to producers, so Will Doyle produced my first record, Mike Lindsay produced my second, and now John Spud Murphy has produced my third. I feel like bringing the songs to each of them, some of the time there've been songs where they're like, oh, I don't really want to touch that one. Like, we can put a little bit on top of it, but like not too much, because I think having such emotional vulnerability, although obviously I do want to say it's crafted by me, so it's vulnerable, but it's vulnerable to a point. But yeah, having like emotional vulnerability, and then also I guess like having the sound be quite vulnerable, having it be very exposed. It's a really good complement to each other. And so I guess that's why we kind of lean into it. Although I do also think that it makes for quite an intense listening experience. So I'm always a bit amazed when people are like, oh yeah, like I've listened to your album so many times. I'm like, really? That's hardcore.
That's work, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's for sure not music that you just listen while you clean your apartment. That's not gonna work. At least for me, no. It has its time and place. But that's a very good point that we should maybe stress on the podcast. So if people that are starting in sound listen to this, don't overproduce stuff. Let it breathe.
Yeah, let it breathe,
it's
for sure.
important. Yeah.
I constantly want to throw stuff on it, and I feel like you start the day throwing everything you can at the wall, and then you spend the second half of the day just taking everything out, and you're just like, actually no, this doesn't benefit it at all. This doesn't help. Yeah, it's fascinating, that editing process. But it's good to, it is good to throw everything at it at the beginning, but then it's whittling it down, or at least I found that anyway.
Yeah. No, absolutely. For me, it was the same. I had one of the songs on my album that was like very bare bones, and it was just, I was happy with it, and then I was kind of afraid that I made a mistake, because it's like, okay, it couldn't be just that, but it's like, nah, just keep it that way. I just like let it master from someone else, just like very, very small fine tuning, but leave it as it is. But it was sometimes it just comes out and it's just like you want it, and then you just have to leave it be and don't mess it up.
Exactly.
Yeah. And speaking of influences of your music, do you have any other forms of storytelling that influence your lyrics and your music? Just other musicians as well, but I mean, you mentioned poetry, so I'm guessing you're also reading a lot of poetry as well.
Yeah, I'm a big literature nerd. I would say that for the last album, actually no, poetry was still an influence. Yeah, poetry and literature almost more than music, which is kind of bizarre. I think I used to, when I was a kid, listen to a lot of music, and now that I have become a musician, I feel like my ears need a rest some of the time. So I'm just reading, or I'm reading literature or reading poetry. Seamus Heaney is a big influence. The Irish poet, I feel like I learnt about him when I was studying, and I reference him a few times on this new album that's going to come out. But there's something about his warmth and kind of the companionship he provides through his poetry that I felt so drawn to, because it just feels like the loveliest place to be. He writes some seriously devastating poems, but somehow they are, packaged up and housed in this beautiful, soft packaging that just feels, friendly. It feels like he's a friend. And I think that feels like something that's kind of important to me in my, not that I get to make the decision, but I guess by putting out any creative thing into the world, you are offering companionship to other people. And I kind of feel like that's my main mission, is to like be a kind of companion or offer companionship, because that's the kind of stuff that I've always found. So, that's why I love Seamus Heaney so much, because I feel like he's been a companion to me, even though he doesn't know it. And he never knew it. But yeah, he's been a companion to me in so many different ways and different parts of my life.
I gotta read up on him for sure then. That's interesting.
He's amazing.
Yeah. So at least I could have told you that you were my companion, at least for the first album, for sure.
That's so lovely.
The first album I heard, but I'm like, yeah. One other thing that I'd like to know is, because it ties a bit into the poetry as well, when you've written a song and recorded it, it has this performance, but then you do live performances. And how do you translate those album recordings, those songs, to live settings? Because I'm guessing it depends on the day, it depends on the mood, how much you change them. Is it something that you just let the days influence you and just let it out however the song comes out, or do you try to stay like true to the material, to the first draft, or to the first version?
Yeah, it's a really good question that I still struggle with all the time.
That's good.
I guess because my music is me, so I do have a band, but ultimately it is me. There is a level of flexibility that I have with my live show, which is, again, everything is contradictions. It's nice and it's difficult. So I have, I can go and play on my own. I can go and do a show with just a guitar, or I can go and do a show with like a sampler and use it for a more kind of filled out sound. And a lot of the time, unfortunately, it's just budget that is stopping me from bringing my whole band with me, because I do love that kind of like fuller, fleshed out sound, but also it can be quite hard touring on your own. So having, some of your best friends around you makes the experience significantly easier. But yeah, it definitely depends. Sometimes it's venue dependent, sometimes it's day dependent. When it's me on my own, like there have been times when I've rocked up with my sampler, which has, it's basically a backing track, and it will have the backing track on it, and I've realised that I'm playing in a church that has like an 11-second reverb. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't think the backing track's going to work in here. It's going to sound, crazy and muddy and not in a good way. I like mud, but not in a nice way. So that will kind of stop me from using it. It's also, it's really interesting. I feel like all of the different ways of creating stuff elicit different responses from people. Like some people are really sniffy about me bringing my sampler and kind of playing a backing track. And then other people are really upset when I've only come with just me and a guitar because they want a more fully fleshed out experience. Admittedly, no one's very upset when I have my full band. So yeah, it's variable and it's tricky, and it's something that I'm still trying to work out. Like even on my last record, In Flux, I played saxophone and I played clarinet all over the album, and I can't afford to bring a 3-part harmony clarinet choir with me everywhere I go. So that was a kind of, I guess there is also an element of having to slightly let go of certain parts of it and think, I'm going to be true to the song, but possibly not true to that exact arrangement. And that's something that as an audience member, I used to find deeply offensive. I'd go and see a band and I'd be like, this sounds nothing like the record. But now I get it. And, I'm just, it makes more sense as I get older why that would happen. And I think I just didn't understand. And also, I understand both ways. I can understand why it would be annoying, but I also understand that it's nice to try and, hear something in a new way or try and work something out in a new way. But yeah, everything is a contradiction. It's all everything and nothing and the same and different and yeah.
Yeah, such is life.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I can totally understand that. I had that in my youth as well, where it's like, oh, this band doesn't sound anything like the record, and now I'm like, oh, amazing, that's a good rendition of the song, because when I want to see him live, do I want to hear the exact same song that I've heard 25 times before, the night before? I don't know. Doesn't make sense to me. So now I'm very happy when people are like really experimenting and just like you said, stay true to the song, to the material, but not to the performance, because it's something different. Like the stage is going to sound different, or just like you said, you have a venue like a church where you can do maybe something else. That's a good way of going by it. Very good. And yeah, speaking about budget, because you mentioned it, I've bought your music on Bandcamp, and I try to buy a lot of music on Bandcamp because I think it's important to try to go as far as you can to support the musician as well. Yeah. How's your experience with that? Is that something that is good for you, like Bandcamp? I'm guessing Spotify is horrible, just like for everyone. Yeah. But which avenues for a fan are good to support your artists?
In all honesty, it's a really tricky one to answer. I think you buying on Bandcamp is wonderful. And I feel like other people would be buying merch, and that would be wonderful. Other people will be sending you a PayPal payment, a one-off payment, and that's wonderful. But, they're also all horribly tinged. Like, nothing is pure, unfortunately. I mean, Spotify is like it's the furthest away from pure that you could possibly be. Like, please, if anyone has a Spotify account, please switch over to a different streaming service. There are apps that will pass it over, you don't have to do anything. But yeah, it's not only going to eat the music industry, it's trying to eat the publishing industry. It's already eaten the podcasting industry. You shouldn't be paying £10 a month to have every book and podcast and song that's ever been written. Sorry, my little spiel there.
No, it's totally fine. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. But it's really tricky. Like, everyone's just trying to do the right thing and make it work for them. And I understand that for some people, like, Spotify is going to be the thing that they're going to be able to do because they want to listen to audiobooks, and maybe they don't, maybe they can't go to the library and sign up to their library audiobook account or whatever. And maybe they don't want to have to pay for 2 different subscriptions, or, there's so many different iterations. So I do get it. And, you know, merch is wonderful, but the price of merch is so much more expensive than it used to be. So even like buying merch now is a different beast. You know, I can't order the quantities that I would have been able to order before. I say before. I wasn't really working when it was, you know, different prices.
I know
like
what you mean, yeah.
Pre-2019 or whatever. But anything that anyone does is lovely. Any way that anyone tries to help is always lovely. Even just sharing it online. Like that makes such a big difference. I mean, you could stream it and turn the sound off and listen to it all night for 30 days or whatever. You know, there's so many different ways that you could try and help, but ultimately it's, you know, the intention is the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's at least good to hear, but it's like I'm at the same place right now where I'm thinking about what's the best way of doing it, and every time I think, oh well, then I'm going to go to a lot of concerts, and then I hear about all those shitty deals with like Ticketmaster and whatever else they are called, where it's like the artists don't get that much anymore from that as well. So I'm thinking, okay, where now does the money come from? I hear from so many new artists. Like there was this one person, I don't remember the name now. He had like a big hit and he did like a YouTube short about that he made like 2 cents out of it, and it has like, I don't know, 5 million streams because the record company took it all and all the other in-betweeners. So yeah, it's really frustrating, but it's good to hear from you at least that you appreciate when people like buy and just send something or share it. We'll continue to do that 100%. For sure.
And it, you know, it's so, I feel like Bandcamp is so lovely because I often just get little messages appearing in my account like, this person has bought your album, and then I'll just get a message that's like, hello, I really like this album, thank you so much for making it. And it just, you know, that's so lovely. It just kind of makes your day.
Wonderful. Absolutely, yeah, that always makes my day as well. Then speaking about challenges, what so far has been like the most challenging part of your career, and how did you overcome it?
It's definitely been my own brain and my own approach to the goblins. Yeah, exactly. Those fucking goblins, man. Yeah, 100%. I feel like and I think that's because I come from a very privileged position. Like my folks have a room in their house that I can live in. You know, if everything goes tits up, I've never really had to worry about buying food or, you know, not having a roof over my head. So as a result, I have been able to just think about music and try and write music. And I know that that's not afforded to everyone, so I'm aware that it's a huge privilege. So yeah, as a result, the demons have just been those within my own brain, just being like, you're not good enough, and, you know, you're a piece of shit, and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, the way, I mean, I don't think I've overcome them entirely, but I've definitely muted them quite a lot. And I think it's just been years and years and years of not really giving them airtime, or, you know, hearing them and then being like, okay, fuck off now. Like, I heard you, now go away. Like, I've got some fucking work to do. And I think that one of the ways that I started doing that was, there's a book called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, who's the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. And I hated Eat, Pray, Love when I read it. So it was funny that I then picked up Big Magic and it changed my life hugely. But it basically is a kind of self-help book / guide to doing some big project or big creative project. And I loved it and I hated it at the same time, because I think she's just very realistic. And she's like, if you show up and you work hard, something will happen. She's like, there is no, you know, well, she does say there is big magic as well. So it's, again, everything's contradicting each other. But she's like, there is no magic formula that you can, you know, have. Yeah. It's just showing up. And I think that was really useful for me, because I think I spent my childhood being like, you know, you read stuff about musicians who've like dreamt a song, or, you know, they kind of wake up one day and they hear this voice and it just sings the song to them, and then they just write it down, and then it's fucking Wonderwall or whatever. Whereas, so I was just waiting. I was like, okay, cool. When's my fucking divine inspiration going to arrive, please? And that, unfortunately, is not the way that I work. So it was quite a sobering thing to learn, but it was also very good, because it meant that I just, put my head down and started working. So that's how I didn't extinguish the fucking goblins, but I definitely, I don't really listen to them so much anymore. Yeah,
you learn to accept that they are part of you, and then just work through it. Exactly.
And sometimes, if you look really, really hard at them, you can see that they're just like me as a scared little child. And I'm like, interesting. You're not the evil thing that I thought you were. You're just terrified.
No, just scared. Yeah, most of the time it's just being scared.
Yeah,
that's all right. Yeah, that's very interesting. And then speaking about maybe your newest album, but I don't know if that's the case. But what's a song from your catalog now that feels closest to who you are right now, and why?
Ooh, that's so nice. I feel like it's probably a blend of two different songs, which is a slightly sneaky answer, sorry.
That's all right.
But I feel like The Orange, which is the last song off my second album, definitely feels like very me. And it's kind of what I'm striving for the whole time. It's a song about basically learning to, I guess, like accept yourself and love yourself and feeling content and feeling happy. And having like loads of platonic love in your life and like, romance, but with friends and just falling in love with loads of people, but it's all kind of platonic. So I would say, but I talk about loving, not having a partner in that. So it would be that, but then this whole new album is about, big whoop. I fell in love. I got a partner and I am contradicting myself all the time, professionally and personally. And so there's probably a couple of songs on that. There's one called Donegal, which is I'm kind of grappling with moving to Ireland and feeling homesick and feeling confused about being an English person in Ireland with the history of colonialism, but also loving my partner, loving being there. I would kind of throw a little bit of that in there. And then also there's a song called Mchiolhu, which is Mchiolhu is in like the southwest of Ireland. It is in Irish, it means you are my music, which is the way that like instead of saying I love you, you say Mchiolhu. And it's a song about that, and I feel like it again just has like little snippets, little moments of mine and my partner's kind of love story in it. And I feel like I need the Orange because it's like the self-love, and then I need like bits of my partner, and then I need the tiny bit of conflict in Donegal of being, maybe homesick, but also loving it. Yeah. I feel like those are the ones. Sorry.
Balance is always important. No, that's not cheating. There's no rules here on the podcast. It's just people talking about something to do with audio. that's the whole thing. I just like audio in general, and there's so many facets to it. And that is time. Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of facets of audio, do you have like any genres or sounds that you'd like to explore in the future that you haven't yet?
Oh God, yeah. I feel like each of my albums has been quite, I think they're quite different. It's been like my songs, but through the prism of a kind of different oral space. And I would love to make stuff that people can dance to. And I would love to make stuff that's more of a kind of traditional band album. I would love to make stuff that's a lot more experimental. I'd love to do more film stuff. I'd love to... There is actually quite a lot of like field recording stuff in my records. It's just quite hidden. So I'd love to play with that a bit more. Yeah, I'm greedy. I want to do everything. I want to try my hand at all of it.
I would opt for the field recording for sure, because that's my passion as well.
Yes.
So. That's always a good idea. And it I don't know, it gives you a little piece of the place you were in. That's always something I really like. It's
absolutely.
Kind of,
Have you heard, there's an album called Diamond Mine by John Hopkins and King Creosote?
No, Diamond Mine. I'm going to write that down right now.
So that was a big inspiration for my next record. Diamond Mine is so King Creosote is a Scottish artist from Fife. And the whole album has a lot of field recordings of kind of being out and about in Fife. And I guess like that mixed in with the sentiment of the songs, mixed in with, so John Hopkins he on this record I think did a lot of recordings and then does his magic of kind of taking stuff and splicing it together to make a kind of beat out of it, but from sounds from the world. And I feel like as a result that record is it's got such a specific sense of place to it. It's so, geographically specific for me when I listen to it. And I was kind of desperate to try and do something like that. So that's this next record that's coming out. I there's a lot of just recordings that I've taken when I'm out and about that we've kind of woven in, and then also recordings of the sea that then meld into my drummer making the sounds of the sea with a kind of brush on a snare, and then amazing cellist that I work with who can literally make her cello sound like birds. So there's kind of what sounds like seagulls, but they're actually her on her cello. And yeah, just like playing with that kind of like I guess the flexibility of going from an actual field recording into like a kind of call and response of creating it with an acoustic instrument, that felt really exciting to me. And also it feels really exciting to talk about, and I feel like I don't get a chance to talk about it very much. So thank you for this podcast.
Of course. That's a perfect place for it. And I'm really excited now, even more so to dive into the new album. I've so far just heard like the 2 songs that have been released. But that's something that I always like when field recordings are used in a creative way. There are a couple of artists that do this really well. The only one I right now that comes to mind is Seal and Ardor. I don't know if you know them.
Oh, no,
it's like
I
an
don't.
American artist. They have, it's very, I would say, heavy stuff. It's like chains rustling and stuff like that, and it's implemented into the drum beat, and it fits the theme of the song and everything. And I'm gonna send you a link later.
Wow.
But that's something that I always really like, because it's these, just like you said, these snippets from a place, and if you know the place, then it's even more dear to you. And if not, sometimes it happens that I visit a place, I visit a city like Berlin or something, and I hear old recordings, and I can realize some kind of feeling there,
For
it's
sure.
like, oh yeah, that's exactly how that place feels right now. So
Yeah.
that's exactly how they wanted it to sound. And I think field recordings are a big part of that, because it captures so much of everything, and there's so much noise in there as well. It's not a clean thing. Field recording most of the
absolutely.
time is not a clean thing, which makes it beautiful.
Yeah. There's a
Wonderful.
a friend of mine works for, do you know about the Quiet Parks scheme thing? Don't know the terminology.
Parks,
Yeah, so
could be the ones I know. Yeah, I had someone on the show.
oh,
last
nice.
year.
Okay, yeah,
This year.
it probably was. But yeah, one of my friends is a Quiet Parks ambassador in Canada, and when I was there, we basically had to hike for like 9 hours up this mountain to try and find
The spot. Yeah.
the spot of no noise, which is wild.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
no human interjections of noise. And it's wild because I'd never really thought about that before. And then, it's one of the things I love about music is the people that I get to meet and the stuff that I get to learn through other people's enthusiasms that then becomes my enthusiasm. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I had Matt Mickelson on the show, who is like the Quiet Parts ambassador of the US, I'm guessing. He's like the protege of Gordon Hampton. I read this book by him because he was like a proprietor of getting this 1 Square Inch of Silence is the name of the book. I can really recommend it to anyone who hasn't read it. And it is
I'm gonna write that down.
wonderful to have these kind of places if you can find them still. And there's not many in the whole world left, to be honest.
Yeah.
But if you are, like, for me as a field recordist, I have that when I'm out and I find a place that is remote enough, and then I go in there like, I don't know, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning. I just recently went on a trip in the Bavarian woods and found like a specific place where there's as less air traffic as possible and as less car traffic as possible. And of course, there's always going to be planes, unfortunately, but sometimes there's these little bits, maybe 10, 15 minutes of silence. And then you can hear for so long, like you can hear a bird like kilometers away. It's just crazy how far your ears can go if they get the chance. But yeah, we get blasted with so much noise that it's almost impossible to have that feeling. But yeah. Canada. Yeah, Canada is definitely on my list as well, especially because of those places, trying to find those like really quiet nature parks and places and just take in the pureness of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And being in the mountains and kind of knowing that there is that vast silence around you was at some, I'm from England, so it's quite different for me, but at some points it was gorgeous, but then occasionally I would be like, fuck man, there's bears and cougars in this forest and I'm just like chilling here and no one can hear me. And that scares the shit out of me. Whereas obviously in England it's like, you know, nothing's going to hurt me except maybe a stinging nettle or something. So yeah, it's amazing having, you know, anything that kind of inspires awe, like the awe of the natural world. And I feel like silence is a really special and underloved one.
That's the thing we're hopefully getting better at protecting in the future. I don't know if we will, but it's like there's so many things that make noise that we are reliant on, and hopefully that's something where technology can involve in also like more quiet matter. But there's also then the problem of having things that we cannot hear, but insects can hear, for example, like electricity and everything. I have like a microphone, for example, that can record the electricity, and you can hear so much buzzing everywhere. And it's, you then realize, damn, that's like, there's constant noise, even if it's silent for us here. That's crazy. And then, your mind starts spinning.
We're so adaptable as well. Like I used to live in London right next to a hospital, and you know, for the first couple of days, I was like, I'm never going to sleep again. I'm only going to hear sirens all the time.
Yeah.
And then after about 5 days, I didn't even notice. And that's kind of terrifying, that your brain can just be like, okay, we'll just switch that off now. It's wonderful.
Apparently it's
very
not
useful.
important.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's the inner mixer. That's something that is. I learned that very quickly. Of course, as well, just like you with like a flat where we had a train station right next to us, or like a train running. So after like a few nights, you would be, oh my god, there's so much train noise. And then like after 2 weeks or something, it's like, oh, I don't hear the train anymore.
Yeah.
And when you go recording, then you realize it even more, because you go out somewhere, you record something, you're like, oh, that was a nice recording of a bird. And then you come home and you hear like, I don't know, the truck from a mile away, you hear this, and you're like, oh, my brain just switched that off because I've been hearing that for 2 hours. So I thought that was beautiful bird recordings, but no. So that's it's a useful tool for sure. But when you start recording and then listening to your recordings, you can hear so many sounds that you just process out, and it's weird. It's really
there's a I don't know if you heard about this. There was a town in Northern Ireland last year where this noise appeared, and about half of the town could hear this noise at night, and then the other half couldn't hear it.
Yes.
And they, you know, people were going mad. People were like, this is, again, we're never going to sleep again. And there was a documentary that was about it on the BBC that I watched that was fascinating, and also quite fascinating in the fact that I'm pretty sure it was just a giant factory that was, you know, it had obviously changed its way of developing whatever it was doing that made this noise, but no one's ever admitted to it. And there was a big, you know, the council did a big thing where they like looked into where the noise was coming from. They found out, and then the noise has reduced. It hasn't stopped, but no one's allowed to know what it is, which is wild as well. But yeah, I don't know, there's something about it that feels like a kind of Edgar Allan Poe, like spooky story, where it's like half the people aren't believed because everyone else is like, well, I didn't hear it and I live in the same place.
Yeah, it's very weird. I think it's a good start for a horror show, maybe. Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah, and while we're already on the topic of recording and microphones, did you already experiment also with like some different kind of microphones? I'm always like very eager to try many different approaches, and of course one of the things is like pickup or contact microphones, which are interesting, or hydrophones where you can record underwater, which is pretty cool, by the way. Like having underwater recordings of a frog right above it croaking is so cool. It's very weird.
That's amazing.
And I can see that being interesting in music production. So I don't know if you've experimented with that, but I've seen in the last year I've visited the live show from Björk, and she had this wonderful setup with a big aquarium and like water drums. I don't know if you know them. It's like an upside down bowl, and like you tap on top of it and it makes like a drumming sound. And then they had underwater microphones picking that up, so you had a clean recording of the drum, of course.
That's
because
so
nothing
cool.
nothing else did influence it. And I always found that kind of interesting. So yeah, if you have anything planned in that regard, If not,
That's
if you want some
fascinating.
tips, let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I always want tips. I feel like it's interesting. I have definitely come to music from a place of being quite kind of technophobic. Like I felt like, and I think this is also probably to do with the goblins, but I think also probably is a little bit true, is that I felt like all the technology was kind of, the guys could do that, but it wasn't accessible to me. So I feel like I've come to it all really late, which is a bit sad, but also better late than never.
Yeah.
So when I'm trying to kind of learn new pieces of equipment or whatever, I definitely feel like my excitement to fear ratio is quite imbalanced. Like I definitely still feel quite a lot more fear, but I'm slowly but surely kind of getting more comfortable with experimenting, with finding new stuff. My partner, do you know Earcam in Paris?
No, haven't I?
It's like a kind of, I guess it's like an experimental sound centre. But my partner's been working there recently, and Bjork was in the other day, and he was like, "Oh my god, I'm in the coolest place in the world." And yeah, I guess like learning to feel more comfortable and confident around the really fun technology that's out there is something that is quite new to me, but definitely feels really exciting. I didn't even know how to use a DAW until like 2.5 years ago. So I think that was also part of the thing why it took me so long to make that first album, and why it felt so insurmountable, because I felt like it felt embarrassing and it also felt completely impossible. So it was a really weird combination. But yeah, I'm slowly increasing my abilities and excitement around everything to do with, technological things, which is funny because I've always loved it in my kind of personal life. But yeah, it's fun. It's been really fun.
Yeah, I can just recommend like looking into a few of those things, especially because you can easily either buy them very cheap or build them yourself very easily nowadays, because it's so easy to build a contact mic for like, I don't know, $20 or $15.
Wow.
And experiment with that. And
that sounds terrifying to me. It sounds great, but I'm like, God, I wish I could do that. But I'm also like, there's no way I could do that.
Then I'm gonna refer you to Jess Riley French, who's a UK-based person who makes amazing microphones, and I bought a lot of them. I'm gonna send you a link as well, because the first time I recorded my cousin, actually, he also plays guitar and sings. He sings pretty good, I think. He says, of course, because of the goblins, he's like not good.
Yeah.
But when we experimented with a lot of those microphones, what I really loved is finding new ways of recording the performance itself. And it's not about the technology, it's just like the feeling in the room. And one of the things I loved was putting a very small microphone directly on the guitar, like pointing at his fingers, and you could hear every pluck, every like stroke of the strings, every silent like thing, like you put your ear like right next to it. And I loved that kind of recording because it felt so intimate. And these kinds of experiments is always something that I'm really into.
That's so
like
interesting.
Mixing music with that. So
yeah, I feel like in my second and third albums, I can't remember the exact microphone that we were using for Influx, but it was a beautiful old kind of condenser mic, and I personally felt so worried listening to it back, because I was like, oh, it sounded too close, and I felt like there was too much of my mouth in it, and I was so concerned. And actually, I listened to an episode of your podcast where I can't remember who the guest was, but they were talking about how having an apple 30 minutes before doing an interview will save your mouth from clicking. But I have braces at the moment, so I'm just clicking all the time. So even now I'm like, oh God. But yeah, I remember that from my second album. And then I guess because I've never felt like a completely competent guitar player, I don't want everyone to hear, because the scratch when you move your hand along the fretboard.
I love that.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. Of course, not every time, but like
sometimes
having that as a kind of accent.
Yeah, true. Yeah. But yeah, I felt like I was battling with myself to try and play it in a way that meant that wasn't quite so such a feature, because on a couple of the songs I was like, actually, I'm really struggling with this, because all I can hear is the and I was, it kind of makes my head a bit funny. But yeah, there's so many different things that are kind of opening up to me as I, like, even so performing live, I don't bring my own microphone. It's normally SM57s, but I have a terrible tendency, because I shut my eyes a lot because I get nervous, my mouth is right on it. And my dynamic range is big. Like, I really utilize the dynamic range. So sometimes I'll come off stage afterwards and whoever's been doing the sound is kind of like slightly panting and they're like, oh my God, you do not make it easy. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. So yeah, I guess there's a new world that I would like to head into, where I'm like, what microphone can I get where I can literally be right on it and it can capture the dynamic range and it can not feel totally overwhelming for whoever it is who's doing the sound, you know. And like, when I was in 2020, when I was just about to release my album, I didn't even know what that was going to be like. I didn't even know how I performed live because I hadn't really done it. Like, this is all stuff that's happened in the last few years for me. So it's really, it's really fascinating and really interesting and exciting and slightly scary, but exciting.
I'm really very much looking forward to all the new experiments and everything new that comes out. So
me too.
I will be listening. Okay, so we're approaching the end. I'm already a few minutes over, but two questions I have left. One is,
sure,
if you can speak to your younger self just starting out in music, what advice would you give? Expect, for example, run because the music industry is broken. Maybe something else.
Oh God, yeah, that's. I mean, the sad realist thing is do start that other career, like have another career and do it at the same time. Because now I feel like I don't have a career to fall back on, and that feels quite perilous. And the other bit of advice, well, I've got so much advice. Second bit of advice would be that thing that I was talking about earlier. Like, you actually have to do the work. I know it's really upsetting, and I know that all of the narratives tell you that that's not how it works, but that's the only way that it works, is you actually have to show up and do it. And yes, you maybe one day you will get a song in a dream, but it will only be because you've written 15 songs in the 15 days preceding that. And yeah, I think the third bit would probably just be like, be nice to yourself. It's all right.
That's the most important.
Yeah.
The goblins are just scared.
Yeah, the goblins are just scared little kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And the last question I have, that's something I always ask every guest, and that is, what is the first sound you ever recorded and why did you record it?
I was trying to think about that because I've listened to your podcast before. Yes. And I actually, there was actually something else that I wanted to tell you about, which was the first ever instance of like live Foley that I experienced, which was so horrifying to me that it stuck in my brain so much. And I was like, I can't believe that exists. So I was in a school play of Dracula when I was about 12 or 13. And in one of the scenes, Dracula had to break someone's neck. And I didn't know how they were going to do it. And in rehearsals, they basically started doing this thing where, you know, those little like plastic cups, the white plastic cups with the little line at the side. Someone off stage would break one of those as he was doing the action to break his neck. And I think everyone in the cast had like a visceral response to that. And it was so horrifying that we had to practice it every single rehearsal, because it was like, we can't just do this to these poor little kids, you know, on the night of the play.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a powerful moment. And I suddenly was like, whoa, this is, a whole new world.
Wonderful.
The first sound I ever recorded, I mean, it would have been my voice, 100%. I was trying to remember, when I was at school, one of the music teachers was very generous and gave me like a little 4-track kind of tape recorder. And I can't remember if it was that, which I just did 4-part harmonies on everything. And I was just harmonizing with myself the whole time. I feel like a vocalist. I don't even feel like a guitarist. I feel like everything has stemmed from my voice and feeling like I want to accompany my voice. And so the idea of being able to re-record myself over my voice was like, oh my God, this is the thing. So yeah, it was either that or it was one of those little, you know, those kind of like joke toy loopers that
Oh, yeah.
people used to have, where you could slow down your vocal and speed it up.
Yeah.
And I can't remember which one came first. They were around the same time. They were both around when I was around 11. But yeah, my voice is my first thing
course.
I ever... Yeah, of course.
Yeah. People are prepared for the question now because they keep listening to the episode, so maybe I'm going to switch it up in the future. Yeah, because I always like when people are not prepared, they're like, oh man, I don't remember. And then they remember something from their childhood. Maybe, just like you said, recording their voice, making radio shows themselves or whatever else. So it's always interesting. But it's also a good answer. So I'm happy with your response. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so anything else you want to promote? Like, of course, the new album is gonna be out when this episode is gonna come out. So please enjoy the album, everyone. It's gonna be amazing. Anything else you want to promote? Maybe your show.
Yeah, I have shows in February in the UK, in March in Ireland, and in kind of mainland Europe in April. And probably I will have a lot of other shows across the rest of the year, 2025. Not sure where they will be or when or what. But I have like a newsletter and I put all my stuff in my newsletter. I'm on all of the social media sites except for X. And yeah, I guess just keep in touch, say hello. Please do listen to stuff. And thank you if you do listen to it.
So thank you again for being on the show, Anna. It was my absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. Yeah. You're so great. I've had so much fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.